Hello, welcome to the kitchen. I have gotten home from work and I'm stressed, so I feel like baking cookies, and I don't really feel like listening to music or a podcast while baking cookies, so instead I'm going to bake cookies while talking about Les Mis, which I finished yesterday, and I have a lot of thoughts, so I'm just going to freestyle talk about it while baking cookies and see what happens. So, yeah. I'm making oatmeal white chocolate cookies. It's a very simple recipe that I found initially online and then just modified to my own liking. You use 1/3 of the bag of white chocolate chips and you put them in a small bowl. I have this kind of like perfectly sized dish that I just kind of can do by eye now. And then you add a little milk to this. So I use vanilla oat milk. And you put in 1/2 tablespoon of this right on top of the white chocolate chips. And then you put this in the microwave for a minute. That's kind of like step 1 for me because it's like that needs to sit for a little bit. Rest we can do. So the next step is to combine butter and sugar. If you've ever made cookies, that's usually how it goes. So I'm going to do that. I don't actually have enough butter to make this recipe, so I'm substituting some applesauce because I love applesauce. So, Les Mis. My first thinking about Les Mis is that I'm not sure whether I love it or I hate it. Because the thing with Les Mis is like you get these passages in it that are absolutely horrendous. Just bad. Just the kind of thing that made me so angry to read because it's the kind of thing that would never fly in a book today. I've already kind of ranted on it about that part in another video, so I won't get into too much detail on it, but it's sections like this where he just goes off on like a big historical tangent or tidbit of explanation about how everything looked and how everything is now when he's writing it in 1861, 1862, as opposed to like when it was actually happening in 1830, 1832, which is just frustrating in a book because you're skimming through it like what is the point of this, and in a lot of cases there doesn't really seem to be a point. The book was published serially. I feel so terrible for the people who like, you know, they just read like Enjolras and Grand'Terre's death, which is like a beautiful passage, a beautiful like romantic sequence. The next book is about the sewer system. It's just a history of the sewer system from when it was first conceptualized to today. Not meaning when Jean Valjean takes Marius down there, but today when Victor Hugo is writing in 1861. You just watch this incredible heart-wrenching scene and then all of a sudden it's sewer time. It makes me in particular mad because I'm a person who's been told off for being too wordy in books before. Just the standards are different, you know? And so it feels ridiculous to like compare modern works to like the quote-unquote greats when like modern works have to be in so many more restrictions. A friend of mine was just saying as I was talking about this that it felt like the book was not edited because of its length, and that is exactly what it felt like. I'm gonna buzz this for a bit, get my anger out. I guess another negative about Les Mis that was kind of bothering me as I read the book was just how like obstinately patriarchal the book was, like all the way through, which like I'm not so surprised by. Like it's 1860. It's not like men had great expectations of feminism, and like Victor Hugo's women are written pretty well for the most part. Like Cosette and Eponine and Fantine, who are the 3 main women in the book, oh, and Madame Thénardier, are all extremely different women. And they're described with personalities that like are very real and tangible 3D things. And yet, the way that they're made to interact with the men is just very like frustrating to read. Like I'm thinking about Eponine in particular, where like Eponine is such a wonderful character to read. Her first appearance in the book, if you haven't read it, is where she flounces into Marius's apartment, essentially demanding money from him. And she finds a mirror there and she's immediately like, oh, you have a mirror? Like, I like it here, I'm staying, because like I don't get the opportunity to be a lady really, and like I liked that kind of subtle narrative of like Eponine trying to find like ways to practice her femininity, and it's interesting because like Cosette and Eponine have this big like swapping places where like Cosette is stripped of all feminine objects while Eponine is praised for them when they're younger. But by the time they get older, Eponine and her sister Zalma are like completely stripped bare of all feminine traits, while Cosette is like lauded and earns them in a certain way. It's definitely like a very strange moralizing femininity that's going on, and that part, not really a fan of, as you might expect. But but I do think it was interestingly done. And like the way that Madame Thénardier is treated is definitely like not excellent. Hang on, buzzing again. In the musical, Madame Thénardier advances with Monsieur Thénardier like all the way through the end, and you see them like in the end scenes together. In the book, she dies off page in prison, which is just a very anticlimactic end. I think in the musical, her character is made to be this like very raunchy, fun, like robust character, and in the book she's not really that. Like, we're told from the very beginning that she's just like, she's ugly and she likes romance novels and just intelligent enough for the romance novels and not intelligent for anything else. And that's like very demeaning towards a lot of women who enjoy romance novels, but also like as a character, not really as compelling as I was thinking she would be, you know? I realized I was telling you how I made these cookies at the beginning and then I just stopped. Basically, I just put in the white chocolate and 1 egg to this mixture, which is 3/4 cups sugar and half a cup of butter and 1/4 cup of applesauce approximately, which comes out to about that. I'm gonna add a little bit of vanilla. I'm not gonna add too much vanilla, even though I think I'm supposed to add half a teaspoon. I'm not gonna add that much, just a little bit. Because the oat milk I'm putting in this as the milk is vanilla oat milk, so I don't need that much. In general, the other thing that bothered me about Les Mis was this very conflicting message in its like philosophical orientation, which is like, on the one hand, it was very like Protestant work ethic, like the most amazing thing in the world is to work for your bread type stuff was just like in there unabashedly. And then there were also very large sections where Hugo was like praising the very nature of a revolution and scooping up this idea that like capitalism just doesn't work, which like I think I read that sequence on a previous video. I'll link it here. Just so interesting to see him like bounce back and forth and kind of wed all of these different ideologies together in a way. So now I'm adding 1.5 cups of flour, and I think half a teaspoon of salt and half a teaspoon of baking soda. My instructions say to mix those things separately and then mix them into the mixture a little bit at a time, but I really don't feel like it. And I'm kind of just making this haphazardly, and I'm the only one who's going to eat them being the cookies. So we're just really going for it. So those are all the things I didn't really love about Les Mis. It's like Victor Hugo's long tangents, Victor Hugo's, I don't know, I'm conflicted about Victor Hugo's attitude towards women, because on the one hand, like, oops, that's a tablespoon, Erica. Nope, not that. I'm conflicted on Victor Hugo's treatment of women because, like, Eponine and Cosette really are good characters in my opinion. Like, I genuinely enjoyed watching them, especially as they foil each other. I don't know, it wasn't great. And then Victor Hugo's kind of like cringy, bootlicking feeling, like pull yourself up by your bootstraps Protestant work ethic that he just like mixed in there, mixed with this like very Hegelian like history requires revolutions thinking. But the things I did like about Les Mis, and there were several. The thing I think I liked the most about Les Mis is the way that the action and the dialogue work so well. Like, there were just entire sections where I was just so taken and captivated by what was happening. Also, you know that thing, if you've ever seen Les Mis the musical, there's this thing that it does to a lot of its viewers where it just completely sucks you in and makes you obsessed with the characters. The book has a way of doing the same thing too. Buzzing. And my secret ingredient I'm gonna add, it's not secret, it's just more oat milk. So like the mixture I have now is a little thick, so I'd like to just splash some oat milk in until it feels thin enough for me to like take off the beater sticks easy. And there we go. Now we have cookie dough. Okay, I finished Les Mis yesterday. like as soon as I got off of work, because I had a phone call for work at 3:30 and I get off at 4, and it was a pretty quick phone call. Like I was done by like 3:40-ish, and I remember I like wrapped up what I was working on, and I think I sent an email, and then I opened up like this, and I went to make dinner, because if I'm making pasta or something where like you don't have to do much but like stir occasionally while it cooks, then I'll read that entire time. And I said to myself, like, oh, I'm just gonna read a little bit, like I'm probably gonna finish tonight, but I'll you know, I'll cook dinner and then I'll go sit on my couch in a little while, like maybe much later tonight. And instead I read from like 4 p.m. to 7:30, which is when I finished the book, without stopping. I stopped once to finish like the last 3 bites of my pasta because it was getting hard to read and eat at the same time. And then I stopped another time to post a single tweet, which is exactly when I got into the sewer sequence. And then I didn't check any of my other messages, which was bad because I missed an important message that I needed to read and I completely forgot about. I immediately went back to reading and just, whew. There's something about what Victor Hugo does when his characters interact where like they're so clearly people, and they do things that don't make sense, but they have thought processes that do, and the entire thing is this very atmospheric, like theatrical thing. And when I say theatrical, I mean like you are aware the whole time that like this is a story that is being told for like you, and it's like it's told as if it were a true history, but it's also being told like a story that you are in the world with these characters, and like you're like Victor Hugo's guest as he writes the story with you, which is a really interesting way of doing it. I think there's a scene towards the beginning where Cosette goes off into the woods by herself at night to go fetch some water, and she starts to like feel that terror of like being in the woods alone at night. Victor Hugo says something like, forests are apocalypses, and then he goes on to say like, and like despair lit in that small soul in the face of that apocalypse. And it was like one of the most beautiful sentences I've ever read. Yes, it was overly flowery, and that's usually not something I'm into. Wow. Cookies, 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 cookies. Victor Hugo's he's a beautiful writer. He really knows what he's doing, and he really shows an exhibition of a love of history and a love of ideas and of a love of people, and he expresses that so well in the way his language works. Like he gives so much page space to characters that like books overlook, and he just gives each character so much adoration as if they're the most important, perfect person in the world, even when he's like talking about all their faults. He spends a whole like set of pages describing the friends of the ABC, but then he also like spends a really long time describing all the freaking criminals that go around with Thénardier. I make really big cookies, by the way. I make very, very large cookies that fall apart and are not cooked all the way through and run together. That's the kind of cookie I'm into. So that's what I'm making. One vibe about Les Mis is like, though there are all these things I hate, that book is gonna stay with me, and it's been like completely and totally haunting me all day. I stayed up late last night reading Les Mis fanfiction, so like that's where we're at. When I go read fanfiction, I always I filter by a kudos count, which is like how many times somebody has told the author that they did a good piece. It's so funny, the Les Mis like highest kudos count, because it's all just like Enjolras and Grantaire, Enjolras and Grantaire, and it's all fucking soulmate AUs, which, to be fair, kind of slap. So yeah, even though Les Mis had a lot of things I did not like about it, and like moments that pulled me so far out of the narrative that I was just like, okay, I'm gonna skip this, and did. Like, it's definitely one of the top 3 books that I've read this year. The first 50 or so pages took me like 5 or 6 days to get through. And then the rest of the book I finished in like 3 days. And that book is 900 pages. So like, that gives you some context. I don't know, there's just something extremely masterful about that book, even though it is like there are clearly points where it's extremely not masterful and like would not at all be considered a sign of good writing today. It's like definitely a classic for a reason, but I don't say that lightly. I hate the classics generally. I don't think many classics are quote-unquote classic for a reason. The reason was they were rich enough to get their book published without people stopping them, and knew enough people to do good marketing for them, because marketing in the book world is and has always been by word of mouth. Oh, these cookies are gonna run together so nice. This is thrilling. Look at them, they're gonna be massive. They're going in the oven. Cookies are in the oven. I'm gonna clean up, but in conclusion, my thoughts on Les Mis. Again, absolutely one of the best books I've read in a while. Definitely this year. It's one of those books that is going to be with me for a really long time, and I'm very, very glad I read. It had a huge impact on me when I finished it, and I've been talking about it for days. Like, I cannot stop talking about it. If you have the patience for this sort of long book, and if you're not one of those people who's a stickler about reading every word, because I think reading every word of this book would ruin the experience, I would give it a read. I'm gonna go listen to the entire soundtrack now. That's gonna be my life for a little bit. Hello, I'm back. I wanted to show you the cookies. Got these mushy boys. They're nice and gooey and a little undercooked, but they've got nice crispy brown undersides. Like, look at this one. Yeah, that one's on the darker side because it's the smallest. But look, it's nice and cooked all the way through, but like still gooey. And then I accidentally made this cookie cake, it appears. This cooked a little longer than I usually let my cookies cook, but it looks really nice and golden brown. So I don't know what I'm gonna do with it, but I'm gonna eat it. It's gonna be great. Look, I've got enough cookies to feed me.